Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we're down at Ryback Beach. Now before we got here this morning we decided we'd stop off at Hastings to take some sunrise pictures of the jetty there, and unfortunately I had checked the app, the Sunset Hue app, before leaving last night, and I was aware that it was potentially going to be a bit of a fizzer. And it did turn out to be that way, although you got some nice black and white shots, I think. So.
Yeah, we adapted. There was no clouds in the sky, but we'll make some feature shots out of it in black and white.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? When you're travelling, you have to make the best of what you've got when you're there.
Hastings is approximately 1 hour from Melbourne, and we got there just in time for sunrise.
I've taken 3 different exposures in case I want to combine them into an HDR type of approach. I've also taken 2 potentially to stitch together for a panorama as well. But as you can see, the sky is offering absolutely nothing. It's freezing. Seagulls are annoying us already.
You know, I've noticed if you turn the lens hood around, it works better.
There's no sun glare just yet, smarty.
Okay, so I'm thinking of getting a shot here from this angle. I'm going to use a 16-35, but what I like about this angle is I've got some foreground interest here, so see how that goes. I might leave the lens shade off, because the lens hood off, because I'm planning on shooting with some filters as well maybe, so let's just see how I get on there. So what you'll see is, instead of being graduated from top to the middle in equal measures, or darker at the top graduating down to lighter in the middle, this is lighter at the top and darker in the middle, and the idea is to knock the sun back when it's on the horizon. So I just slot that into my holder, and now it's simply a case of adjusting it, and yeah, I can see that's bringing down the sun in the horizon there, and it's just evening out the exposure between the sky and the foreground. That's bringing me down to 1/3 of a second at f16. I'm going for f16 because I'm wanting to keep as much foreground to background sharpness as I can, greater depth of field. Let's just see what I'm getting. And one of the issues with this filter, however, is that you do get anything such as the boat shed will also be slightly darkened off as well. So let's just see if I like it.
So here you can see the boat shed in the right hand side of the frame, and this is shot without the filter, and then as soon as I added the filter, this is the problem that I faced.
I think it's actually working against me in that sense, so I'm going to pull that out and go with just a natural shot. What I'll do is I will shoot several frames and I'll bracket them. I think that's the better option here. Sometimes filters are wonderful, sometimes they work against you, and you have to decide on the location when you're there.
So it's great that we brought about 100 filters between us and we won't use them.
Yeah, that's right.
Tremendous.
So this is the final image from the bracketed 5 images that I have captured, and I have to say outright that I wouldn't be showing this image for any other reason other than for teaching purposes, because personally I really don't like it. Now I don't know whether it's just because I hadn't had enough sleep or my brain was coffee deprived, but to me there's nothing about this image that really commends it. For a start, I'm not happy with my composition. I don't know why I left this area in. It doesn't help in any way, shape or form. I should have moved a little closer perhaps. Secondly, I'm not really that wild about the power station in the background. I also don't particularly like the composition. It just feels off to me in this area here. I also don't like the fact that I've oversaturated it in the post-processing, coupled with the fact that I don't know what I was thinking of when that I didn't notice that cage in the middle of the jetty. I really probably should have shot from the other side. Well, that's okay, this is the point. Sometimes when you arrive on location, when you're doing landscape photography, things don't always work to your advantage, and sometimes you just need to have a moment to really get into your groove. In this instance, I far prefer the shot that Mark took around the other side, and it was clearly the better location to be shooting from, so lesson learned.
quite a nice shot of the oil refinery, which is just incredibly picturesque at this time of the day. So I'm going for a single shot exposure. Aperture is very wide at f4, so I'm just looking for foreground detail to start with. The sun shooting straight into the sun, so I'm going to get quite a bit of silhouetting on the yachts. Just more of an abstract shot now that the sun's basically burning my pupils out.
Mark's gone to shooting details, and I honestly think that's the best thing you can do in a location when it's just not working for you particularly well. And as you mentioned, we've got the beautiful power station in the background, which is always a landscape photographer's dream. So I think it's time to switch over, maybe get some of the lovely, doing it handheld, get some lovely shots of the light coming through the leaves here. So I think that's what I'm going to do. This is going to be an abandoned shot, and hopefully we get something better a little later on.
So we've got Michael getting as low as he possibly can to try and salvage something out of the compositions available to us.
I'm just not sure mangrove is that exciting. Really...
Work with it, Michael, work with it, come on.
I switched to the RF 100 to 500 in order to capture more of a black and white documentary feel to the scenes surrounding me. Here we have a fisherman on his way to the boat's heading out, and a solitary pelican just perched atop one of the posts in the bay.
So this gentleman's just told us that yesterday morning was the morning for the sunrise, and of course we came this morning. Yeah. So I suppose one of the keys to good landscape photography is in the prior planning, which probably should involve a little bit more than just me ringing you and saying, yeah, that looks all right, we'll do that. But at least we've come out, and sometimes when you do come out to shoot, it does turn into a fizzer and you don't always get what you're after. I have to say though, I think you got a quite nice black and white shot there. I don't think I've got anything, but you did quite well with that shot, I think.
I think when you're shooting directly into the sun, a featureless sky, selecting a detail shot, going for black and white, perhaps, as they say, a fine art option.
Yeah.
I always think you can salvage something out of each shot, so
yeah.
You may be surprised yourself when you look at your own.
Yeah, yeah, wait to see it on the computer. It's just I've just burnt my retinas out by looking directly into the sun this morning, so...
I'm sure a good dose of breakfast will fix him up.
Yeah. So then after that, we decided we'd come on to the back beach here at Rye and take some photographs of the Dragon's Head Rock, which I don't know if you can see, it's just that tiny little speck behind me there. I personally thought, well, I'll go with the 5 DSR. I like to give this an outing every now and then. I love the 50 megapixel sensor. And I thought, well, I'll use the 16 to 35 f4. Because there's not a cloud in the sky, my thinking was, well, I'll shoot some long exposure stuff to see if I can get that nice wispy water. So I'm gonna experiment with some filters when I get out there. I think you're thinking much the same, aren't you? Along the same lines.
Yep, yeah, the same camera, the 5 DSR, the 24 to 70 lens.
Yep.
Something for a bit of a closer view of the rock.
Yep.
Probably a 10 stop with a soft grad type filter. I'll see when I get out there.
Okay.
Just to blur the water.
Yep.
And just get some nice time exposure going. It may end up as a black and white as well, as you say, given the sky, but
yeah,
we'll try.
But the other thing is, if you do come down here, you've got to make it at low tide, because I think we're still going to get our tootsies are going to get wet going out there. Should have bought extra socks. That's what planning's all about, isn't it?
There's no app for that though, is there?
No. All right, well, let's get out there and see what we get. So we're almost underwater here at Dragon's Head Rock, and Mark, you're shooting with a 5 DSR. Just tell me what you've been doing here.
So I've got the 24 to 70 lens on the 5 DSR, aiming at the rock.
Yep.
I've got 2 magnetic filters, a 10 stop and a soft grad, which are very easy to use. And what that's allowing me to do is get an exposure time of 8 to 10 seconds.
Okay, right.
And what that's doing is then softening out the water beneath the rock.
Yep.
To get a nice blurred
Yeah.
landscape look. Yeah.
I've done much the same. I'm using the Nisi filter system as well. Yours is the circular clip-on system. Mine is the larger size filters.
simply because I have to use these with my 17mm tilt shift lens. So they're the 150 size, but they're lovely filters to use. Now I've been using, to shoot the same sort of thing, I was using a 16-35 f4 on the Canon 5 DSR, and I decided to try 3 different exposure values. So I used the 6 stop, the 10 stop, and the 15 stop filter. The 6 stop gave me a couple of seconds exposure to just get a little bit of nice fluffiness in the water, a little bit of blur. The 10 stop at f16 was giving me about 20 seconds, and the 15 stop, I cranked that up to a 3-minute exposure. So I haven't seen them properly on the back of the camera yet because it's very glary out here, as you can tell by the way I'm squinting back into the camera. But it'd be interesting to see what the exposure, what the various exposures look like when we get them back to the computer when we get back home, obviously.
And by going with 3 minutes, that's how we both got saturated socks.
Yeah, I've got completely saturated socks. And of course I foolishly got right down close to the water's edge there and got sprayed. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I think both of us have gone this route today because, as you can see, it's virtually a cloudless sky. So to add some interest to it, I'm thinking, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking possibly black and white for my image. Because there's nothing in the sky to add interest to the shot, I thought maybe that motion of the waves, that nice silky smooth, would give me an interesting result.
It'll be interesting to compare colour in black and white.
Yeah, and because I'm looking to lengthen the exposure, I'm shooting at ISO 100. You're of course
100.
doing the same. Yeah, okay. So, well, let's go and dry our socks and get some lunch. I haven't eaten for about an hour, so I must be starving as you...
Fading away as usual.
This was the final image taken by Mark down at Dragon's Head. And as you can see, this is taken with his 24-70 at approximately 45mm. He's used his filter, so he's got a 10-stop ND filter on here, meaning that at f13, his exposure time was 10 seconds, shooting at ISO 100. Before I started capturing shots with the 16-35 using filters, I thought I'd just take a quick snap to show everyone what it looks like, unfiltered obviously. This is at a 400th of a second, shot at f6.3 ISO 100 on the 5 DSR. After I had tested this composition, I moved very slightly to include more in the foreground detail, and I used the 6-stop ND filter on the front of my lens. Now I'm shooting it at f16, and this yielded for me an exposure time of 1.6 seconds. As you can see, there is some movement in the water, and it gives it a slightly interesting result. I say slightly because personally I preferred the 10-stop filter, which I then put on to the front of my lens in place of the 6-stop, and that meant that I was having to shoot at f16 with a 20-second exposure. Now, to my eye, this is a much more interesting result. I've got the nice blur in the water. I've got the ghostly seagull in the background there as it wanders around behind the Dragon's Head. But it's giving a much more interesting sort of ethereal feel to the photograph. From this point, I then removed the 10-stop and I put on the 15-stop Nisi filter. And this gave me a really, really beautiful exposure at 3 minutes, so 180 seconds. And I've got just a slightly different feel. You can just see a little bit of difference in the clouds in the sky, but obviously the foreground, it almost looks like a carpet with that lovely, soft, wispy water. Now, I'd be interested to know in the comments below which is your favourite. I still haven't decided, but I'm leaning towards the longer exposure. The only issue, as I think I mentioned with the longer exposure shot, was that due to the wave splashing all over my feet, I did get some drops on the front of the filter, which I then had to retouch out. Other than that, it was a really, really useful and an interesting morning spent down at the rock. Funnily enough, you may have noticed that despite the fact that we suggested before we went out, we were thinking in black and white, it's interesting to see that I only used one of my images as a black and white conversion and Mark none at all. So we're obviously taken with the colours. That's also one of the advantages I have found in the Nisi filter system as opposed to when I used to use the Lee filters. The Nisi filter system doesn't give me a colour cast. It's a neutral system, I have found. Although at 3 minutes there was a very, very minor amount of magenta creeping into this image, which I've then corrected in post. Had I have shot this with my Lee filter system, this would have been very, very blue indeed. So that was one of the reasons I went to the Nisi filters, and I found them to be exceptional performers. Now, a lot of landscape photographers will claim you don't need to use filters, and I can understand that, particularly with today's modern sensors, it's possible to yield enough detail in the shadow and the highlights, so you've got enough dynamic range to get one frame giving you all the detail that you need. What I would suggest, however, is that when you then want to do something like long exposure work, well, clearly there is no other way of doing it other than using filters. So, that about wraps it up for today. We did move on after this, but I think that's going to be the subject of another video. We certainly hope you've enjoyed watching, and if you've got some value out of it, we'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like and perhaps considered subscribing. Until then, we look forward to seeing you in the next video.